shared common language through symbology. And I really just hope that you can catch all of the small details that we are trying to pinpoint out for you. Without further ado, I would really like to welcome in Dr. Adamji and Francesco Spagnolo. They have been such an amazing mentorship program for me. Not only are they experts in their fields with masterful amounts of knowledge and expertise, they are also two compassionate people who care deeply about the kindness they promote in their field. Kumar Adamji is an art historian of the Islamic world and the Indian subcontinent. Formerly an associate curator of South Asian and Islamic art at the Asian Art Museum in San Francisco, Dr. Adamji began her career in the Islamic art department at the Metropolitan Museum of Art, New York, and has recently returned to the Met as provenance researcher in the Asian art department. Please give a hand to Kumar. Francesco Spagnolo here, who I'm sure you know very well, is the curator of the Magnus Collection of Jewish Art and Life. He is also an associate adjunct professor at UC Berkeley's Department of Music and Center for Jewish Studies. He is also affiliated with the Berkeley Center for the Study of Religion, the Institute of European Studies, the Center for Middle Eastern Studies, and the Religious Diversity Center of the Haas Institute. Please welcome Francesco.
Before we say anything, can we also give another round of applause? Yes. We are so lucky that we have such amazing students to think with and to kind of test what the future of the memory embedded in all the objects in the collection can be. So we really learn a lot from our students, and that's it. In a way, it's one of the secret sauces of this whole project. Right? Kumar jumped in right away, also teaching and really engaging with students as well.
Indeed, working with students has been offers a mirror and forces people like us to keep questioning our own assumptions and to reassessing and to sometimes even have to explain why we take something so for granted. And in that, it creates a dialectical process of questioning and searching for new answers. So thank you. Thank you to you and to all the other students we work with.
We're not going to have to say anything, we're just going to clap. That's great. But since we're doing thank yous, actually, a huge thank you to Kumar for being so there all these years. And in a way, this project really begins with her because she found out about me and my work, and she called me in at the Asian Art Museum long before the 5 years that this project started. And you guys were considering an acquisition of materials from India that were from Jewish communities in India, and so they called me in to kind of take a look and think about it, and we kind of never stopped talking, right? So we've been checking on each other's work and progress and exhibitions and research all these years, and in a way, this project kind of flows naturally from that relationship we've been built. We're already familiar with how we work, and I think we sort of knew that we had some common ground, especially I think we're both skilled at identifying patterns across various types of materials.
And I'll say Burmese food does it too.
And yes, and spicy food is also very important in this relationship.
Being able to, I think that's what this exhibition kind of eventually shows itself to be, where you start to take things that on the surface look different, but the more you interrogate them, the more you look at them, you realize, yes, there are patterns, there are threads that tie it all together, and to me it feels like a fabric, a beautiful textile, where different threads come together and they each hold their own place, but they are part of something new and something interesting.
Over the weekend we were texting back and forth, just thinking together about what to say today, and so I'm just going to read from the little exchange we had, but I was trying to define for all of you what I I think, brings us together, and was saying that we're both scholars of cultural diasporas in odd places. We'd studied diasporas and religious cultures in very odd places, in the crevices of history. And we're also really good at identifying patterns in transcultural and global ways. This is very much because of the materials we work with, not because we want to find them. They're very much there in a way. This project is about that. It's about what we learn by looking and studying a variety of objects together and translating what we learn together into a shared language that is in front of all of you in the gallery. So I wrote this to Kamara almost instantly, which is rare to answer to a message right away. But she said, I like that. And also she wrote much better than whatever I could have said. And so she said, it's also about not taking current political, religious, cultural, ethnic, nationalist demarcations as either airtight or reflective of the histories of the people or regions. So that's kind of where we're at. And we also think of cultural histories in the plural, so we really see interactions, intersections, overlappings, shared patterns, shared humanity. And I think if we were to write, and I hope we will at some point, an op-ed somewhere, I would call it the power of nuance. That's really what inspired our work day in, day out. We've had, as has been described, a variety of collaborators, both really dear scholars here at UC Berkeley and abroad and everywhere. And we sometimes brought people we knew into our conversations that to test some ideas out to see what currency what we're studying had. And we had really a sequel of amazing undergraduate students who helped us. Hannah Weissman was saying earlier, we started out so that the first step of this was to kind of map out essentially a very boring spreadsheet of about a little over 1,400 items: manuscripts, photographs, postcards, textiles, ritual objects, garments, you name it, all sorts of materials, and you see a representation of that in the exhibition gallery, but that all had provenance from the Muslim world. And we started with that, but in a way, part of that was also to track back the provenance, how these objects came, and think together about how these objects came to Berkeley. It's not like every day that an object moves across continents and oceans. And the main reasons we found for that, and this is important in order to center our work, is that these objects were collected by Magnus emissaries, the Frommers and their associates, over a few decades, by visiting countries in North Africa and the Middle East, where they found objects that had been left behind by Jews and communities that had left either because they needed to leave, because they wanted to migrate and pursue different and better options, or because they were persecuted in their own homes where they had been for hundreds of years. And so these objects are also the result of layers of dispossession that continued in the migration. Other objects were acquired in Israel from dealers, where immigrants, from Jewish immigrants from Muslim lands arrived, and they needed to fund, like most immigrants, needed to fund their migration process, and so they sold family heirlooms. And then last but not least, they were also acquired by families already in the United States, already settled, that wanted to archive their family lore, their memory, their life in a museum collection. So we, in a way, benefit from these multiple layers of displacement and dispossession, and we really try to make the best out of that. But that's what museum work is, right? It's not particular to the Magnus. You're working exactly on this at the Metropolitan Museum of Art, so you know more than I do what this involves. Kamara is representing the entire Indian subcontinent in research in the provenance at the Metropolitan.
Right?
Yeah, yes, and more.
But on that, I think today I walked into the gallery for the first time. We've been working on this for a while, and Carol has been sending us designs, and we've been looking at all of that. But there is something else that happens when you actually come physically in contact with an object. And walking through the gallery, one of the things that I was reminded of was how collections, institutions, but also these spaces, but specifically objects, become memory keepers. They retain the memories of the histories of the people who own them, who made them, who use them, and it behooves us now to take care of them and to share those, keep those memories alive. And it is something that, again, with music in the galleries and the sounds that come through, the entire experience of humanness, everydayness, of occasions big and small that we each engage with in our lives, and what we see through these lovely things in the gallery.
So, we didn't prepare any of this, but we did prepare a little presentation for you guys. So it's not like we came here just to chat like that. So what we are going to do, the exhibition is organized according to 6 sections, 5 actually, centering on light. Light is at the center of the gallery. And the 5 sections are very much inspired by the shape of the hamsa, of the hand, which is one of the most known, shared. As we try to describe these materials of mutually meaningful visual ideas and shapes. And so we're going to guide you through how we organize the exhibition, and then we're going to close with a little exercise, and this will be somewhat improvised, of sharing something that Kamer has learned in this process, something that I feel I've learned in this process, and something that we think we may have even learned together, because that also happened in this process and very much informs the display. So we start with the light and shadow section of the exhibition. It's very much at the center of the gallery. And this is a lampshade. We're still, the jury is still out about whether we believe either Egypt or Morocco. In any case, we're talking about North Africa, or an extended North Africa, and most likely made for some kind of tourist market. And then we started looking closely at this object. We see that it's inscribed. You see there are 2 circles of text in Hebrew, and those are all biblical quotations, so they come directly from the Hebrew Bible. And then the middle section has these phenomenal, so this is where I learned, phenomenal shapes, which are the footprint of the sandal of Prophet Muhammad, right?
Yes.
So that's where we're going.
When I first saw this object, I was like, wait a minute, what's a sandal doing here? And you know, someday this will make for an excellent topic for a dissertation or a master's thesis, because it's this motif of the footprint and that sandal is very distinctive of North African Muslim traditions, and the Arabic inscriptions on that shoe-shaped or whatever, that sandal-shaped image include the glorified names of Muhammad, Prophet. So, you know, again, this makes for a much, calls for a much closer study of what they're doing together, but here they are.
This is very much in plain sight, but it takes a trained eye to actually identify the patterns and understand the relationship between all the elements here. So, among other things, this lampshade, thanks to an amazing installation designed by Carol Jank, who's here, and by David Sullivan, who is somewhere in the room, who's our preparator. This lampshade actually projects the shadow at the center of the gallery. The idea is for visitors to walk in and be kind of bathing into the light projected through this lampshade. So visitors are kind of inundated by this double layer or multiple layer of meanings, overlapping meanings, and we're still trying to figure out why they all coexist on this object, but they do. And that's where we start from, and that's what we document. We move in the gallery to a section that we titled Belonging in Place. And I remember very much pushing for this section and this concept. And the first thing I want to say is that highlighted here, among the many objects in this section of this display, is a tray that was made in Tehran by Joseph, are you here? by his father, who was an artist, a metal worker, and Joseph is here. Please, since we're applauding, let's applaud Joseph, who's very much thank you for being here. And one important feature embedded in the history of this and other beautiful objects that this incredible artist made in Iran is that this artist left Iran, like many Jews and many others, non-Jews, left Iran after the 1978-79 revolution. And like I've seen patterns in diaspora and Jewish diaspora of expulsion of artists and how artists, even when they land safely in a new country, in this case, he arrived to San Francisco and rejoined his family in San Francisco, they experienced after that halt in their creativity. Somehow trauma and displacement may cause that, and this is one of those cases. So this incredible artist, because of history, essentially ceased to be an artist. And so what we have is also a memory of trauma, but also very much a memory of belonging. If you know, this is a Passover Seder scene depicted in the tray, and everybody is sitting and eating from before, which is one of the key characteristics of life across many Muslim countries. And so it prompts us to rethink both the canons of the Passover Seder and at the same time gives us an important context about Jewish life in Iran.
And the imagery also looks and reminds me of often depicted scenes of the prophet Joseph, who's a servant in the house of Zuleika, and she's a feast that she's holding with her ladies, and he comes in, and everybody's so enthralled by his beauty, they cut their hands. So the layout and all of that is also coming from a long history of Persian visual culture. So over and over through the objects we see those
and the whole
connections.
landscape there, it's also very much about place. So the idea behind this section of the exhibition, one of the key ideas that informed us, was to actually highlight something that often when discussing diaspora and Jewish diaspora is not really considered. Oftentimes we connect diaspora with uprootedness, with being torn from one's origin and living as a guest in another land. But also what we see, and very much we see through objects, is this sense of rootedness, of belonging that Jewish diaspora has. And especially in Muslim lands, the many, many centuries of Jewish life all across them. So we wanted to really very much highlight this.
Well, and then once you start to look at objects, immediately a few images and motifs just pop up. You start to see the six-pointed star, you start to see the crescent moon, the concentric circles that are often seen as amuletic protection against the evil eye, or we see forms of trees. These kind of motifs that run through both, of course, at the Hamsa, or what I recognize as the hand of Fatima, these kind of motifs run across cultures, across regions, and me being the art historian of Islamic culture, and we're always very reluctant to put a hard meaning to certain symbols, because there are so many regional variations on meaning. And yet we see right here overlapping and shared use of shapes. And regardless of what one might call a specific meaning of this or that, the underlying commonality is their auspiciousness and their sacrality. And that notion goes across and is easily mutable to fit with specific cultural and regional heritage. Oh, the lions, and lions are right there as well. Whether you see them as the lion of Ali, or the lion of Judah, the lion of the Qatar state, there is a lion.
Yes, the lions are there too. And then in a little bit we'll talk about cypress trees.
Exactly. Yes. So I will get that.
One of our key.
Yes.
when I was saying that we look at patterns across media, this is an example of that. We discussed very much the fact that not just architectures, but very much the architecture of the palace seems to be a prevalent format across medium and across cultures in the areas we considered and materials we considered. What we have here is a little exercise that you will find in the gallery. It's a visual exercise. We have on the left a ketubah, Jewish marriage contract, which is organized. The text of the contract is inscribed inside the shape of a horseshoe arch. And we find the same art in a palace, a very important palace, also with links to Jewish history in Fez, but we see those arches very much in architectural shape on buildings, but we also see it on the right, shaping up a Hanukkah lamp. And many Moroccan Hanukkah lamps have this same pattern, which has rootedness in Andalusia, and in a variety of shared cultural spaces. So we try to trace ideas of mutually meaningful shapes and formats, not just across cultures, but also across cultural formats. So this is one of the elements that inspired our selection of objects. Again, we went from 1,400 to 60 objects. So of course, that's part of the curatorial work, is to have to make choices and decide what stays in an exhibition and what goes.
Sometimes they're really, really hard choices.
And in this case, we had many options, many good ones.
But this is about, this section on texts and bodies was another thing that, as these two images right there show, the Torah case and the bridal costume. The notion of the ways in which the Word of God, is at the center of both Muslim and Jewish faiths. And the Word is recited, maybe even heard, and as a child is born, you hear the Word of God before you can do anything else. Recited, memorized, and internalized within the heart and the mind. And that kind of is a very foundational element in both cultural systems and religious systems. And we see that the power of the word then becomes used as in all kinds of everyday objects as well. The power of God's word to protect, to bring blessing, to celebrate, to bring auspiciousness into one's daily life. Which is then accompanied by these motifs of abundance, celebration, and beauty, which, as we see here in these two examples up here, but elsewhere in the gallery, where motifs of flowers and these exuberant floral, vegetal motifs of creating abundance and beauty as they surround the Word of God, bring the secular, the religious realms all together into one's life.
I just want to add one thing about the collecting history of the dress on the right, which belonged to the late Sarah Levy, a longtime resident of Berkeley, whose family was a family of Iberian Sephardic Jews who found refuge in the Ottoman Empire on the island of Rhodes. And pretty much the entire community of Jews of Rhodes was wiped out in 1943 once the German Nazis arrived to take control of the island. They were shipped off to Paris, and many have already died on the ships on the trip to Greece, and then the others were taken directly to Birkenau. Sarah was sent by her family when she was 16 years old to the United States to help a cousin in 1936, I think. And so she arrived before World War II, and her mother, as she sent her off, not knowing whether she would see her daughter again or when, filled the trunk with all kinds of family memorabilia, including this wedding dress that had been made to be shared by, well, she had several sisters, but by the daughters of the family. And so she arrived to California and eventually to Berkeley with all these materials, donated it to the Magnus eventually. we were very fortunate, I was very fortunate in the family to be friends with Sara. We shared Italian as a common language, so we had a special kinship. So there are many stories that came to me because of this dress and because of Sara. And again, we're moving from the East Mediterranean to the west of the Mediterranean. We're moving across cultures and lands. We're talking about different Jewish origins, different cultures, but we also see very strong shared patterns. So this is what we do in our work here. And now this is the bane of your curatorial existence, is the lamp with the camel.
Yes.
We'll talk about global networks first.
What was also, again, another uniting factor is the role of trade, merchant communities that, again, proliferate in both these cultures. And these kind of exchanges that come out of such movements and these global diasporic communities. And here we have a group of objects from Damascus, mostly, some Egypt as well, but from the 19th century. And the late 19th and early 20th centuries are also really interesting.
I do want to add that our camel lamp is from the 1930s.
Yeah, not the century. It's from the 19th, yes. You see, as we were saying, our students keep us honest. So this is an example, a live example of that. Thank you, Paris.
Thank you. Right. Not in the, actually that happened in the 11th century too, and we have lots of texts that speak to Carrageenisa being one of them, not quite 11th, but example of it. But by the 19th century, there is anxiety of the post-colonial world, of what does it mean to be modern, how does traditional craft and design end up being functioning in a industrialized modern world. And we have examples of these that we see in the gallery of negotiations of colonial parties, of local parties who are trying to revive craft, traditional craft, and yet catering to a new clientele, a modern clientele, a European and American set of tourists who are going through the Middle East and making the trip to the Holy Land.
If I can add
Yes.
to this, and very much thanks to Julie Franklin, our registrar and the person that really makes all of this happen. You know, we're here to talk about it, but somebody makes this happen, and that's Julie. She was actually doing some research on this lamp format, and what we found in other collections is the exact same lamp. The top with the six-pointed star is actually a screw-on top. It can be unscrewed. And we find versions of the same lamp with the Ottoman crescent. So you can cater the object to the customer. And so the blending of culture is also very much, in this case, an issue of opportunities. The same is of the sharing of molds and across workshops, etc. So as a way to actually share resources and also make a living.
Indeed, I mean, yes.
But Kamar, I know you have more to say about this. So we have the same slide, but no longer talking about. No, the next slide is really about Kamar dealing with these types of objects and what she learns from looking at them.
Right. So, I will confess that I come from a kind of a 19th century Europeanized training of art historical connoisseurship, and there are certain kinds of things that you value, and of course, according to most textbooks, Islamic art ends in 1800. I mean, there's nothing else after that, because after that it all gets diluted and it's not pure, and why bother studying it? So,
By the way, in any text Jewish art doesn't begin until the 1900s, so
Oh, there
we're
you
not that
go.
special, you know.
So, I look at these things like this, candelabra, and to me, I'm seeing, oh my gosh, this is fantastic. This looks just like, a Ayyubid period, 11th century Syrian high-quality metalwork, and
We're talking about the candelabra.
the
on the
candelabra,
right.
on the right. And then I see that camel lamp, and I'm like, in my head, I'm thinking, eye rolling and saying, oh my gosh, tchotchke, you know. But in the course of
As you
this,
say in Karachi and we say in Milan, Italy, Chachi.
yes, of course. And so I'm looking at this, as you're looking at these things together, I totally did revise my opinion on this. And indeed started to be seeing things like camel lamp in a brand new light. And as this project got me to research, like, what is happening in 19th century Damascus? Why are these things back in? Because after the 12th century, you start seeing this kind of inlaid metalwork, and this candelabra is gorgeous. Anyhow, that got me studying some more, which got me to a 19th century manual on the history of crafts of Damascus, and which has recently been translated, and a colleague of mine has worked on it. And in there are listing 400 different crafts specialties of Damascus, where the authors are trying to recapture and hold on to this changing world of post-industrialization Syria. And in the section on inlaid metalwork is the fact that the Jewish community of Damascus is the one that was the ones doing all of the metalwork. So again, this is where you come full circle. You start with assumptions, you start with what you know, you question, you critique, you dig further, and you come out of it with something fresh and new. And then I learned that this thing about the lamp had a changeable finial, and which brings us into a whole other world of tourism and souvenir, and how we all take back, again, memory. A memory of something, a romanticized notion of the past, a way to capture the present and take it to the future. So that was my takeaway from this project, one example.
And here's my perspective. Next slide. Yep, that's mine. So this is a type of object that we find created in Morocco between the 1920s, 30s, and 50s. So early 20th century until the time in which Moroccan Jews start leaving Morocco and immigrating. And what these objects are technically bags, which we find as an object type, as an item type across the Jewish world to hold the prayer shawl. The prayer shawl is a ritual garment that's worn typically during prayer, but could be worn at any time because it fulfills a commandment found in the book of Deuteronomy to add fringes to the corners of one's clothes. And so the shawl helps fulfilling that commandment. And bags are created to just protect the ritual garment from use, from decay. But in Morocco, we find this specific type of bags produced specifically as gifts to boys who are having their bar mitzvah. So this is a bar mitzvah gift. And there are many like this in this collection, in many other collections across the world. And when I looked at this, and this object type, so not specifically this one, but this object type that I studied this years ago before we even began this project, I was really thinking about two things. Number one, the idea of the gift for bar mitzvah. So bar mitzvah is, in Jewish history, a status. When a male turns 13, roughly around age of 13, becomes an adult ritually and is obliged to wear phylacteries, tefillin, wear the prayer shawl, pray, and read from the Bible, from the Torah in the synagogue, recite prayers every day, etc. Historically, the idea of celebrating this moment is a relatively modern one. So the idea of having so not becoming bar mitzvah, but having, as we say in English commonly, having a bar mitzvah, right? Going to a bar mitzvah, having a bar mitzvah, is very different from becoming bar mitzvah, which is a change in personal and social status. So the idea of a gift is more about the ceremony than about the change in status. And it's very much the result of mostly French colonialism, as in Jewish French colonialism in North Africa and Morocco. So we started researching this, and what we found is that until the early 20th century, the traditional way to celebrate a bar mitzvah, a boy becoming bar mitzvah, was that the boy would show up typically on a Thursday morning for morning prayers, wear tefillin, wear the phylacteries, put on the prayer shawl, recite prayers, read from the Torah if they were able to, etc. And then the way to celebrate it would be give the boy a cigarette, sometimes a shot of whiskey or similar liquor, and then they would go off for their workday. End of story. The idea of marking it with a gift, these are all inscribed with the name of the boy becoming a mitzvah, so they're really a personalized gift, is instead to recognize an event. The other thing that inspired me in looking at these bags is that they actually look like briefcases. They look like white-collar items, which is, to me, also very representative of the specific social status that Jews often occupy in the colonial world, kind of oftentimes a status in between colonial powers and the colonized. So they're both colonized, but also adjacent to colonial powers, and very much due to campaigns of education from Europe, starting from Europe and going across the Muslim world for Jews, etc. So it's also actually very much a briefcase, to the point that I think a colleague from Berkeley, when he looked at these things, said the Magda should actually produce replicas of these and sell them as iPad cases. So Hannah, take note, and as a way to fundraise. And then we look at this together with Karen, and the first thing she says, is that these actually look like bags to hold the Quran. And I start learning about this. And then we start looking together as shared symbologies. We talked about shared shapes, right? And what we see here are 6 pointed stars at the bottom and 2 sides at the bottom of the bag. And that's by the beautiful silver filigree. Many of these are embroidered velvet or other textiles, some are leather, etc. So this is particularly beautiful in terms of craft, one. And at the center, right after the name in red, at the center is a 8-pointed star. It's the result of superimposing 2 squares. Now again, in working together on this, I learned how the 8-pointed star is also a typographical marker of Quranic texts, a way to divide sections of the sacred text. What do I get from this kind of conversation? It actually revise or augment my knowledge of this type of objects by being driven back to the ritual function of holding, so not just the case, but really what it holds, what it contains, which is actually an object that is an embodied text. The shawl is a way to not just fulfill a commandment, but kind of translates the written commandment into material form, into a material object. So I'm actually brought back to the religious and spiritual meaning of this bag, and all of those other layers are still there, still colonial and post-colonial, still all kinds of other things, still like the kind of the invention, discovery of young adulthood, but also very much a ritual object grounded in scriptural traditions.
You need any
over and over again, I think this segment idea keeps coming up, where it is building up of meaning, which just becomes more rich as the more you recognize the meanings, the more you can, richer it becomes, but it does not detract. It still keeps building upon that core of sacrality and of sacredness or auspiciousness, and these are just kind of more and more layers of meaning on the same theme.
And we close our presentation so that hopefully we still have time to actually visit the gallery and see our work. This is a little bit of a Where's Waldo kind of. So these are details from various objects. There will be more, and very much selected by Paris.
Right. You've been looking at these so closely, and you've been finding them.
Here are cypress trees in various forms, and you will see the one in the center here has become like a graphic identifier for the exhibition itself, so you would see it replicated in various ways across the walls of the gallery. But you see it in the same candelabrum we were discussing from Damascus, in a head covering from Tunisia, in a Suzani dowry textile from Central Asia. At the center, the big one, a ketubah, Jewish binary contract from Iran. We have a print from Jerusalem from the early 20th century, and then a Torah Ar Curtain, another textile also from Jerusalem from the late 19th century. And my knowledge of these trees was very much so the classical knowledge of cypress trees. By the way, wood that some traditions consider was the wood used to build the ark, Noah's Ark. But very much as a symbol connected to the city of Jerusalem. And then, first of all, Kamar points to the center one also as a cypress tree, but she brings in a whole other layer of meaning here, so please share.
To me, I view cypress trees as the salve tree from Persian poetry. And, the way I associated, or my understanding of it was, again, through poetic references, not Quranic, not Hadith, not any religious thing, but it was seen as a motif and a symbolic notation for being upright, being morally courageous, being kind of flexible, strong, yet be like a sarv tree, bend with the wind. It was the motif of beauty, of growth, generation, etc. So then when I learned about it, that it's, wait a minute, there are really more specific scriptural, symbolic references, it just made me look at these all over again in a whole new way.
And cypress trees
and now we see them everywhere.
We see cypress trees everywhere. And we try to tease that out in the exhibition, but a lot of it is also left to the viewer. So a lot of, we tried here to point out some possible threats, but there are really many more in the display and many more in the work that we've done together. I want to thank you, Kamar, for being such an amazing colleague and friend. I'm so lucky. And I think you all are.
I would like to thank you and at the Magnus for keeping me going with this, because this project personally meant a lot to me at a time of great deal of transition in my personal life. When I left I didn't leave New York, I went back there. I left San Francisco and it was COVID, and my one link to being engaged with a lot of things was because of this exhibition, because of engagement with Francesco, with his students, with all of the Magnus team. And so, this came at a very personally profound moment for me, a difficult moment for me. So, thank you all. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I believe it was worth going to be enjoyed. it, and a whole exhibition next door. We talked about it plenty, right? So
Yes.
you can now
Please
see
go
it.
look
Thank you,
and
thank you, thank you.
enjoy looking. Thank you.